still remember the feeling of his hands.
I felt I'd been violated.
How many of us are there?
Dr. Nasser used his status and his authority to engage in horrid sexual assaults under the guise of medical procedures.
Shame on MSU, USAG, and the United States Olympic Committee for this gross, inexcusable negligence.
I don't even have words. It's so disappointing. If they really cared, if they really were sorry, they would be there.
Everyone in the world should be outraged right now.
It's been over a year since Larry Nassar received an effective life sentence for sexually abusing more than 300 women and girls. And now, after an 18-month investigation into the mishandling of these cases, Congress is taking action. A bipartisan bill proposed by Kansas Senator Jerry Moran and Connecticut Senator Richard Blumenthal proposes to give Congress the power to dissolve the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee's board if they don't follow guidelines to protect athletes from sexual abuse, including more than tripling the amount of funding for Safe Sport, the organization focused on abuse prevention and investigation of abuse claims, increasing the number of athletes on the USOPC board, and requiring the Olympic Committee to do a better job of policing its governing bodies like USA Gymnastics, which has faced criticism from creating a culture that enabled Nassar's sexual crimes to being tone deaf to the concerns of gymnasts on a variety of issues, including abuse. For a deeper look, let's bring in the co-sponsors of the legislation, Senators Richard Blumenthal and Senator Jerry Moran. Senators, let me ask you this. In today's political climate, we don't often see both parties working together. This is a bipartisan bill, though. Senator Moran, why was it important for you to do this, to offer this legislation together?
Well, Senator Blumenthal and I have worked closely together. I chair a subcommittee. He's the ranking Democrat on that subcommittee. We have the responsibility in that subcommittee for the U.S. Olympic Committee for amateur athletics. This is a jurisdiction within the Commerce Committee. And plus, this issue is there should be no partisanship at all to this issue. And I would actually say probably the most compelling thing, what brings us both together, what brings, I hope, Republicans and Democrats together in support of this legislation, are the survivors. They are the ones who came to us, who spoke so sincerely, with such courage. It would be a terrible response if that then became something partisan. And so what I would say is we feel, Richard and I both feel a duty, a responsibility to the athletes, certainly to the Olympics in general as well. But the athletes were the ones who had the courage to tell their story. And they're the ones who had been betrayed, forgotten, overlooked, ignored by institutions and individuals. And we certainly don't want Congress to be another one of those institutions that fails to respond to very serious and damaging circumstances, something that shouldn't happen to anyone and yet happens so repeatedly to so many Olympic athletes.
Indeed it did. Senator Blumenthal, one of the amazing things about your bill is the over tripling of the amount of money that goes to Safe Sport, one of the organizations that not only investigates these kinds of claims but protects athletes. Where specifically do you want that money spent within Safe Sport?
That money has to be spent to make Safe Sport completely independent so that athletes will have no fear of retaliation when they speak truth to power. It should be spent on the staff needed to investigate, the protection for whistleblowers, and to assure that the culture has changed. Really, we're talking about a massive seismic change in culture, not just a few technical baby steps here. And I want to really thank and salute Senator Moran for his leadership, because it has been bipartisan, legislating the way it used to be and the way the American people deserve to see it be. And he is absolutely right. The courage and strength of these survivors has been so profoundly important. We're at a moment of reckoning, a year before the next Olympics. I'd like to see a pin or a ribbon worn at these Olympics in honor of these survivors who have been so enormously important in this process. They've been change agents. They've driven it. USA Gymnastics was rotten to the core. The culture put medals and money over morals, and the athletes stood up to it.
Now, Senators, on the other side of this is the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee. They talked about working with you on this. The CEO of the USOPC, Sarah Hirshland, responded to the news of your legislation saying that they're committed to improving athlete safety, and they applaud your efforts and they look forward to working with you. But they added this statement as well. There are sections of the proposed legislation that, while conceptually appropriate, could result in unintended consequences and disruption for athletes in operational reality. What do you make of that?
I would say that we certainly would want the USOC to be supportive of the changes that are outlined in our legislation. If there are details that need to be addressed, and I would guess that we will have an opportunity, I know we'll have an opportunity for individuals and organizations to present their ideas about our legislation. That is the way the legislative process should work. We do not want this legislation or its goals undermined, but if there are details that we can modify that solve a particular problem, some of the unintended consequence that Senator Blumenthal and our staff didn't expect, we're certainly open to those kind of changes.
What some have theorized, Senator, what some have theorized is the idea that you take money, you put all this money into safe sport, you have less for athlete training. If that happens, does that jibe with your mission of what you're trying to accomplish?
That will not and should not happen. There is plenty of money for athlete training, for facilities, for fields. They need to be made safe for the athletes, and we welcome any sort of constructive changes, but the vague bromides and platitudes that talk about operational reality, the Olympic Committee needs to get behind this legislation, and Congress will disband and fire the United States Olympic Committee if it fails to put not only money, but action where the talk is. The time for baby steps is over. We need real progress here.
Okay, as you mentioned, a massive, massive change in this oversight for Congress. Senators, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.